For being here this evening and taking an opportunity to help us determine what the path forward is with this facility. As Mayor said, thinking about where this project lies in the context of the larger recreation conversations we've been having is really this is a continuum. This is really where we determine what makes sense at this building. A question that I get asked quite a bit when we started this process was, why are we even having this conversation? I feel like the public perhaps already has spoken about what should be occurring with this facility. And that's not quite correct. One of the things that we heard over and over and over when we went through our master planning process was what's going to happen at this facility? What's going to happen at this facility? We didn't have an answer for it because at that point in the process, we didn't know if we were going to be rebuilding, if we'd be building new. But one of the things we said is that before anything occurs at this facility, as the mayor said, we're going to have a public conversation about this. Is the public's building, and it's not up to us to determine what comes here next without input from you, the residents, that ultimately want to make sure that whatever happens is the right thing, is that it honors the past, honors the building, perhaps the people that went to school here, or perhaps the person whose name's on it, and that it doesn't just either get sold or thrown or torn down, or there's a variety of things that could come about at this site. All of them, I'm sure, have merit, and that's what we want to hear from you folks. So again, welcome. This is our first public meeting. There has been a committee that's been put together from the mayor, by a bunch of folks within the community. A lot of folks that have never been on committees before, but have good backgrounds in architecture, interior design, construction management. The people that can help us visualize what are the opportunities that exist at this site, either in this building or on this site, or perhaps none of those, none of the above. So we're excited that you're here. We're excited to share some of the ideas that have been thrown around from the point of council. I'm going to hand it over to actually the chair, Stacey Chavetta. She's going to share with you the folks that are on the committee and say a couple introductory words before we turn it over to our consultants.
Dim the lights a little bit.
Hi, thank you guys for being here. As Chris said, I'm Stacey Chavetta. I'm the committee chair for the 5701 Steering Committee. I, along with the lovely people that are listed on the screen here, everyone that's on the committee could raise their hand or just a little hello. I think everyone is pretty much here tonight, so we're glad that you all decided to come join us this evening and kind of give your input as well. I believe that we all have kind of a diverse representation. That's why we were chosen to be on the committee, but we obviously want to hear your ideas as well. So. With that being said, I think I'm going to kick it over to Vicki Notice, and she will get us going tonight.
Thank you. Give that to her. Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me, everybody? No? Louder? Yeah, maybe that'd be helpful. Thank you. The mic is here, so I forget sometimes where it is. Thank you very much. My name is Vicki Notice. I'm part of a consultant team that the city has hired to help facilitate the decision on this process. We want it to be a public process, and we want it to not drag out forever. And so we were selected to help the city. The lead firm is Collins, Notice and Associates, and Bob Collins, my partner, is here tonight to help. We do urban planning, comprehensive planning, municipal planning. We help with municipal strategies and do a lot of work with city councils and work in the public sector a lot. We're both from the public sector. We both worked in Kansas City, Missouri as director of planning and city manager. We have on our team Confluence, and Hank is in the back. They are helping us with all of the physical and facility issues and are an integral part of this, as well as Mary Jo Draper, who's sitting here, and she's going to help also tonight. The agenda for tonight is basically we want to share some information, some facts about what we're doing, so everybody's on the same page. And then we do want you to do a little bit of work. It's not going to be hard, and don't bolt out the door when it's time to break up into smaller groups, because that's where we really need your input. And then we are going to convene back again just to make sure everybody has heard what you guys have come up with in terms of ideas. So the purpose of this effort as the mayor said and Chris said, is to develop a cost-effective strategy for the future use of the Irene B. French Community Center. To do that, we've had to look at some of the challenges that we need to face if we're going to make this decision and have it be right, as Chris mentioned. There are a lot of physical issues about the building we're going to briefly go over. There are financial issues and market constraints, which one of the ideas that's come up is to sell the building. And we want to be as open as possible about what the chances of that are and what you'd have to do if that's the recommendation. And there's a balance between available dollars and where they come from and the use that we all want to see. So there's lots of things, lots of great ideas out there, and you can do anything when you have unlimited dollars. But as taxpayers in Merriam, you know we don't have unlimited dollars. So we're trying to find a creative and smart use of the property, and your new community center is opening up in a year. And so we need to have a decision made because everything in here moves there. This building is empty, and that's when we need to have know what we're going to do so that it doesn't just sit here empty while people are still having discussions about it. This is a site map. You're also going to have this at your tables. North is up. You can see I-35 and the train tracks. Farmers Market that you guys have is on this side, Turkey Creek, and then on this site that we're on, we've outlined the building in red. We're showing the 3 different sections of it because it's been added onto twice. So you can get a sense of how big the site is and what we have to work with, and we'll have that available for you to look at too. Several years ago, when the city was starting to think about what this building would need to do to remain the community center that everybody wants, they hired a professional firm, an architectural firm, who are experts in preservation. I've known them for a long time. They've done all kinds of incredible work, and they're pretty good assessors of what it's going to take for any given building to renovate it and have it become basically a different use. And so to go through the timeline, just to make sure we all have that in our head, the original elementary school was built in 1911. The gymnasium addition that we are in was 1938. They added the kitchen and classroom addition in 1951. And then, as the mayor mentioned, in 1989, the building was purchased by the city of Merriam. And then they put in the entrance and the elevator to make it publicly accessible. So it opened as the actual Merriam Community Center in 1990. And you can see on this slide a little bit better where the original building is. North is to the this way, I think. To the right. Thank you. So you can see where the oldest building is a square that shows up. You do have a lot of parking. You do have a lot of green space on this site. And it's about a 4-acre site. Is that what you said, Hank? Is that right? And so as part of this study that the architectural firm did, their name is Susan Richards Johnson Architects. They changed their name a couple years ago and reformatted. They're now called Strata Architects, which is actually easier to say. But the city hired them to do an initial assessment of the entire building so that you'd have some idea of what you're talking about when you have to fix problems, bring things up to code, change the floor plan or whatever to a different kind of use. And so they did that in 2015. It's very, very thorough. And they made, and so there's a lot of detail in it that we've tried to summarize for you. There were general observations that we think are basically true, and the committee, when they looked at this, agreed that these issues are basically what we're looking at. That it's been maintained well, but the age of the infrastructure is causing some problems. There's some serious water problems and some structural issues. Heating and cooling and mechanical and electrical are an ongoing problem. And then the issue of life safety, fire, exits, that kind of thing is an issue that has to be addressed. And like every other older building, like all of our houses, has problems with low energy efficiency. So there, just to review, most of you know these issues. You've come to this building, you've used this building, and you know what some of these challenges really are. But the heating and cooling is an issue because of the way the three additions were joined together. There's 23 air handler units throughout the building, which is a lot. And you've got different kind of systems going to different parts of the building, which is part of what's making it inefficient. There's 12 sump pumps outside. I'm sure you guys are aware of this problem. And I think you may have the record for 7 sump pumps inside. And that's to get rid of the water that you got a serious water problem when it rains, et cetera. And this stuff, when if sometimes they're hard to fix right away, but if you don't fix them right away, they just get worse, and then they just cost more money. And so you guys are sort of at the point where you're at a threshold on how much money you're putting into this building to just keep up. The water in the basement's a serious issue. That's the sump pumps, and creates problems in other parts of the building. There's a lot of exterior piping that was done because of the additions. And a lot of the interior pipes have got real problems. There is still some asbestos in this building as well, so whatever you do, we either have to remediate it or contain it if we're going to reuse the building. And so these are some images of where those problems are. You've got problems with cracks and settling, and that's not unusual for any building that's 100 years old. The problems in the building have caused simple things like they're not simple to Anna, but the ceiling caves in. Every time something like that happens, it's a constant maintenance issue, and you kind of never know where the next thing's gonna hit. The metal decking has a lot of corrosion on it. Some of the support joists are rusted. That's a pretty serious issue, and there are also roof issues. The life safety concerns, this is about fire suppression and exits out of the building. Sometimes depending on what you use it for, you have to have more ground level exits. If you have a lot of public assembly space, that means you have to have certain kinds of exits covered. And because it's kind of all developed at a different time frame in each one, again, it's kind of patched together and is a serious issue. Accessibility is a bigger issue than that. For people who need wheelchairs or strollers or anything like that to get in the building and be able to use it and use the restrooms, that's a problem because this stuff is dated. It's not just that you have to keep up because you think it's the right thing. Your building codes are not going to let you add on or do anything major without bringing the accessibility up to code. And you also have problems with your elevator, which is partly why that's in there for that system. And that's because it's just a 2-story deal. It's expensive to fix that elevator, and it's kind of on its last legs, or to replace it, either one. So to sum up their findings, after they looked at everything, and it's a very detailed plan that looks at different scenarios and everything you would have to address and what those cost estimates are. And we're not going to go through all that or we'd be here for a very long time. But basically their findings were that this building, the 30s edition, and the 1911 original building are in the best shape. and they are worth exploring to preserve or renovate. Removal of the 50s addition is almost a given. There are so many problems with that that trying to save it is going to cost more than you really can possibly get back out of it. And that was after they looked at a lot of issues in terms, it's not just cost, it's other issues as well. So if you took the 50s addition off and renovated the rest of it, the cost estimate then in 2015 was $5.6 million. And all these numbers are going to drive you crazy because they're big. And to those of us as individual homeowners, you know, that seems unfathomable. But for a project this size, that's right. If you renovated the building and put a new addition on, that goes up to $9.7 million. And if you did a full replacement of this building, meaning not exactly, but a building the same size, same footprint, about 43,000 square feet, you're talking at least $15 million. And that's not really knowing what would be happening inside, which of course would possibly add to that. If you were to tear it down, the whole thing, the estimate for that is $500,000 to $750,000, which seems like a lot that maybe we could demolish it ourselves, but no, you can't do that. And this may be a little high, but frankly, it could go a lot of different ways. So we went ahead and put that up there as a range so that apples to apples, we know that there's a cost. You can't just say that's zero cost if you want to demolish it. There is some asbestos still in the building, which is a health issue, and you have to be very careful about how you remove it. And then the electrical and mechanical issues that we basically showed in the slides are the major concern. So looking at some of the options, we just went through a couple of them, but if you were to renovate the existing building, take rid of the 50s addition, do site improvements along with renovating it, 5.6 is what we said before. But 4 years of inflation in the construction industry is a lot. And so that raises it up to about $7 million. Other options that you could look at, which include renovating part of the building, adding an addition, you can take that on or off depending on what you want to use it for, basically is $9.7 million, and by the time you add inflation to that, you're up to $12 million for that option as well. And then tearing down and building a new structure is the most expensive option. And that's running between $15 and $20 million and per square foot now in terms of construction costs, that's probably right. We've been working with the committee. They've met twice to estimate what some of these options are. And the reason I'm spending time on this is that, and I'll talk about this in a second, we cannot separate what we'd like to see happen here in a vacuum. We just want to make sure everybody understands what the parameters of this are and what the consequences of any decision is. So no one's surprised if you say, well, we're going to do a new building, and you don't want anybody surprised for a $15 million price tag. And the city has a responsibility to be fiscally responsive on this and try to find the best solution. So the first option, as I mentioned, take everything down, build everything back, which we don't really have a use for right now, $15 to $20 million. If you demolish the 50s addition, do a full renovation of this and the original building, we're talking $7 million estimate. If you demolish the 50s addition and then do just a very bare bones renovation, and we're just calling this a warm shell where you don't do anything inside but you keep it heated and cooled and you have to replace it. And one of the things I forgot to mention is that if we just want to deal with these two parts of the building, all of the HVAC and everything is run out of the equipment in the 50s building. So it's not an this is a civic math problem. And so it's not just as easy as you would think. And so you have to either build all that new to put it in here, and it's got so many problems it'd be hard to fix it, but you have to take that cost into everybody's estimates. If you preserve, this idea came up, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but if you just preserve the stone shell of the 1911 building to try and keep the outside and at least protect the stone, but basically gut it on the inside and then use that for some other purpose, that's about 1.3 million. And then if you want to demolish the entire building, we're talking about 500,000 to, that's supposed to be 750,000, I'm not sure what happened there. And then other people have brought up ideas about park amenities, that with or without the building, that some ideas for the site are to use it for green space, to put an amphitheater on it or a pavilion or something that can get jointly programmed with the marketplace. There's a lot of ideas that you guys have brought up on the surveys that have been done in the last couple of years and on your website. So we're estimating that, and that could really go up or down depending on what you wanted to do, but we're putting in $1 to $5 million depending on what you'd like to do. And we do have some, the committee did look at some examples from other cities that have done this, that have actually built it, and what theirs cost. Liberty did significant amount of work. Gladstone has for a pretty reasonable amount of money. That we have that available, and we can talk with you about it if you want to. The other thing that Strata did, and just so you know that we're using this as our basis for accurate information, is that if you couldn't make a decision and you just had to do something in the next 2 years to keep the building from falling apart, that would be $372,000. So in the next 2 years, if you stay here or leave it to be decided later, it's going to cost you that much to fix it. And if you wanted to do something more specific from 2 to 5 years out, then that's where you're back into the $5 million figure. So no matter what we do, there's costs involved. So we listed out sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly, which you can read for yourself, and you probably fill this out for yourself. But you know, this was a big part of Merriam history. People have a lot of positive sentiment about the school itself. It has been used for different things over the years, which most older buildings have to do that for adaptive reuse to be able to survive. It's been in the community a long time. It's a great location, and there's a lot of different activities that you can work out of the building itself. The biggest problems are that we have underutilized spaces, partly because of use, but mostly because of the problem with the odor from the sewage backup problem and the water leakage problem. And then it's pretty dated interior, and that raises accessibility issues, so you'd have to address that. The worst issue is the ongoing maintenance and remediation, which is just really pretty constant. The cost of any kind of replacement or repair or just keeping it open is money that we have to find for, if whatever the resource is, to try and do what we'd like to see what we'd like to see happen on this site. So, you know, their estimate, which was, we don't have to use because we can change it any way we want, was ballpark $6 million to do anything in the next 5 years. And every time you wait, every year you wait, the construction costs go up even farther. So, great question, now what do we do? One of the things that I think is important in a process like this is that we all look at those objective facts. It's a fact that the basement leaks. It's a fact that there's 20 sump pumps in the building and around it. So there are lots of subjective opinions about what we'd like to see happen, and you have submitted a lot of those on the website and through the surveys, etc. So the first thing we do, and we've been, I think the committee represented you all pretty well on collecting ideas for reuse, and they had a lot themselves after a lot of thoughtful input. We need to establish the goals that what we're trying to do here. Are we trying to save part of Merriam's history no matter what it costs? Are we trying to, we're getting some feedback already. Are we trying to make it something that the city will still own but will become some other kind of asset that might help downtown? We need to establish the strategies for how we would accomplish those goals. And I'll show you some suggestions here in a sec. And then I just went through the cost implications because you really can't separate out new uses or great ideas from that. We can make it more accurate based on what we decide to do, but for ballpark, that's where we are. So out of the surveys and out of the committee, which looked at all of those and has been working on how these might fit together, we grouped all of the ideas that have come out from every place you've had them so far, and they tended to fall in 3 categories if you take the issue of taxpayer money out for a sec, because they all are going to have to relate to that. But they sort of tended to fall into categories about ideas for it to be a connection to downtown, to make this space relate to downtown and help it in some way. We grouped the second one is into historic preservation ideas for how to reuse it. How much could we save? What could we do with that? And incorporate some of the buildings into some of the amenities. These are not mutually exclusive. We just put them in areas so we could begin to talk about them from that point of view. And the third one, people had a lot of ideas for making this into open space with park amenities, outdoor civic amenities where people could gather. And people felt really strongly that, and we want to verify this tonight, but that this is an important piece of land that the city should not give up. And we want to talk about that in the conversation tonight, that you can sell it. Once you sell it, it's gone. And as other cities have found out and other school districts, once you sell it and the person who bought it lets it run completely into the ground and can't make anything work, you get blamed for it because people still think it's your facility. But in that case, you'd get a one-time revenue boost from selling it, and then somebody else would manage it and take care of all these issues. People were really interested in family-oriented activities. It came up that the trail is a real amenity, and so trying to tie some use into the marketplace uses and the trail and this piece of ground, whether there's buildings on it or not, is a really strong thread that runs through this. So, people felt mostly that it's an opportunity to provide a higher quality of life for people with another city amenity. That a family emphasis had a lot of people talking about that. There was a lot of interest in trying to make it put an education component into it, and that's whether there's buildings here or not. There's a lot of different ways that cities are doing that now that are kind of fun. Strong sense of community, and then make a decision that provides options for the future if the flood control happens. And the status of that is that the Corps has not yet released what it would cost to fix the flooding problems related to them. Only a corner of this site is actually in the current floodplain, but the floodplain lines could possibly change. And then the other theme that went through every single thing we looked at was be mindful of taxpayer dollars. So don't separate all these great ideas out from their cost. We can still look at a lot of great ideas, and we can look at creative, cheaper ways to do some of them, but you can't do anything for free. So that kind of, the committee developed some preliminary goals that we want you to think about and let us know if you think these are on track or if we've missed the boat altogether. but find the greatest community value for the next 25 to 50 years. No matter what shape a building's in, it's going to last a long time. This is a 50-year decision that you're getting ready to make. And so it's important on a city-owned piece of ground that is an asset. Minimize the cost and maximize the revenue. I think I'm directly quoting a couple of people on this one. Keep the property as an asset and then make the decision now. Several people have said, you know, can we just get all the ideas together and then think about it a little bit longer? And of course you can. The problem is in June 2020, nothing's happening in this building. So you have to prepare for that. Even if you want to just close the building and mothball it, you know, keep the heating and cooling going so stuff doesn't break, even though the heating and cooling is broken already. And just leave it with no activity inside, even that costs money and can cause problems with vandals and an attractive nuisance, that kind of thing. So people on the committee felt very strongly that we have the process here, we have a whole lot of people interested now. Make the decision now. It's hard, but it's not going to get any easier in a couple of months or another year or whatever. So that was one thing the committee felt strongly about, and we want you guys to verify whether you think that's an issue as well. So the committee came up with 3 strategy ideas for how to accomplish those goals. How do you make it a community asset for the next 25 to 50 years? There's 3 main things we looked at, and they fall around the way the ideas group themselves. One is to create a downtown catalyst. One is to create an active and distinct public open space. It's not a replication of all your other parks. You guys have a lot of good parks. And then preserve as much as possible and feasible of the 1911 building. Now, these are not mutually exclusive either. You could do something that does all 3 of those things. But there's lots of ideas in those categories that might stand alone as well. So we need your input tonight to figure that out. The committee looked at those 3 groupings and categories and looked at some ideas that other cities have done. We have boards over here on the side that have images of things in other places that some of them are sort of like this and some of them are a lot like this. But it helps give you a sense of what this could be. So if you're thinking, I like the idea of an open space, but I don't understand how you would make an ice skating rink work or a volleyball court or whatever it might be, these images really help with that. They're real. They give you a sense of character that you might want to incorporate, or there's some things that you may really hate over there. So we're going to give you a way to voice your opinion on that. After I finish in a few seconds, we're going to ask you to get some little sticky dots from Mary Jo over here and Bob over here, so that everybody in the room gets 8 green dots to put on these for things you like, and 4 red dots for things you really hate. And you can pile them all up on one image if you want to use your dots that way. I don't care if you trade them off with each other or put a red dot on your husband's head or whatever. But that'll give us a sense right away, give you a sense of what people are kind of thinking, what the community kind of feels like on this. And it's a fun exercise. You can also grab another cup of coffee and a cookie and run to the restroom, and in a couple minutes when you're done with that, we're going to sit down and work on these scenario ideas. We're going to, I think that you guys have a great number. We're going to divide you into 4 groups. There's 4 sets of tables around. They each have a base map of the site on them. They have these puzzle pieces we created that have all these options, or lots of these options, to scale, so you can see how big something would be. If you think retail is a great idea and you're trying to figure out how to put a coffee shop in here, you can do that at your table. And they all have a dollar sign on them, or multiple dollar signs. They're kind of like how you rate hotels. Only in this case, a 5-star rating means it's the most expensive option. So you'll see that. You have a facilitator at each of these tables. We will help you get through this. And one of the things about that I forgot to mention under the market analysis issue is that, and the committees had long conversations about this as well, it's really fun to think we could put a residential here, or people really would like to see retail open up, or restaurants, or at least have some place to go when you're done on the trail, that kind of thing. And you can do that. It's feasible to do it physically. But in terms of the market, your downtown buildings right now are renting out for about $8 a square foot. That's what they're getting in rent. Anytime you build anything new, you're paying $300 a square foot or so for new construction. And to be able to pay for that, and you have people move in and lease the space from you for a coffee shop and a restaurant and whatever, they probably can't afford the $15 to $20 a square foot that new construction will cost you. So you have this dichotomy between a downtown that is hanging on and is looking at strategies for strengthening it. This whole effort could be a big part of that, but just understand that there are reasons why nobody's done that so far. Opened up a coffee shop for that. But there are strategies for how you could get to something like that, with like pop-up food trucks, and maybe you have every Tuesday you have taco food trucks there and some other kind of activity, or something that happens on the farmers market days. And that can change. You can put a pop-up beer garden in, you can, and those are easy to put up, and then that person leaves. And somebody else comes in to do something else interesting. And those are always fun. The people who've done that in other cities, it's really imaginative and it's pretty fun. So when we get to your tables, and you can just sit where you want, and if you all, for some reason, we're all going to be doing the same thing. So it doesn't matter, every table's doing the same thing. So if you want to split up equally among the tables, then we will help facilitate a discussion for about half an hour for you to play with these puzzle pieces and see what you think. So in your group, you're going to try and come back with some kind of consensus on what you think from a community perspective you can do with all this information. All the facts and all the data, and then all the great creative ideas. They got to merge someplace, and the committee's responsibility is to send a recommendation to the council, so they do that, but they don't want to do that by themselves, and we want you to, this is your chance to weigh in. And you can do this online as well. We're going to have this information up online, the presentation will be up, but you won't have the face-to-face contact, which is, one, more fun, and two, more effective. And so we hope tonight that you guys really get a sense of what makes sense, what you'd like to see with your taxpayer dollars, or some other great resource that is possible that you might think of. Then after that, at the tables, there's a survey card that we just want you to fill out before you leave. It's got questions on there that will also help us gauge how you feel about some of these issues. And you can just fill those out and either leave them on the table or put them up at the front table. And I hope everybody's signed in, because that's the way we'll find you again. There's going to be another public meeting we're here where the orange star is on April 29th. This is our first public meeting. The committee needs to meet after this to sort through all this stuff, and their commitment is just that they've committed more time to this than you have. It's time consuming, it's a big responsibility. They all want to make sure that they hear information from the community, but somebody has to make a decision and a recommendation that you guys will have a chance to weigh in on again in the end of June, June 26th, I think is what that's set up, again at this facility, I think. When we do that, we'll have kind of a different arrangement for how to get your feedback at that point. But the reason there's so much time between end of April and end of June is that after tonight, we sift through this information and we go off and start drawing and adding resources to that and coming up with a couple of scenarios, 2 or 3, maybe, whatever makes sense, of what you can do. One of them might be something everybody loves is the downtown catalyst ideas, maybe something that you come up with tonight that no one's thought of. And so they're not going to be apples to apples, they're going to be like, this idea is one thing and it's probably going to look like this much cost, but it's going to do these, have a lot of pros and cons with that. This other one could be something completely different, could be about programs instead of physical things. So it doesn't matter that they may not be equivalent, we just want to develop to a higher level of degree of detail so that when the committee looks at those, and it takes us a month or so to get that done, that we come back to you with things that have been sort of married together and what they look like and what their recommendation is going to be. So you get to come back, the end of June is basically the summary of that statement, and we want you to come back and bring some of your neighbors with you. It's really important that we get the community input on where this is, and this is a complicated project. This isn't simple. So we appreciate the time people are putting into this and thinking about it, and I hope you don't bolt out the door after your dot exercise because you don't want to work on the map. We really need you to sit and help us and think through that on the maps. And then we want those 4 groups to report back out just so everybody can see if you're completely different ideas or we're starting to see some kind of thread through all of them or some consensus. We want to find that out. And one of you will get nominated. Whoever went to the restroom will probably have to be the spokesperson for each group. It's not hard. The facilitator will help you. But keep in mind that we want you to explain what you just went through on this. So with that, I'm going to leave the website up here because in case somebody wants to get back and submit more ideas or have your neighbors submit more ideas, you can certainly do it that way.
One of the things that we came up with, and it was pretty much a consensus at our table, was that the history of the bricks and the flooring, the walls of this building were important to the city of Merriam and important to a lot of people. We know that there's some people in the room that went to school here. And again, that was important. So preserving that history, to what extent, I don't know that we came to a decision there, but I know that the history was important. We talked about, the future, what's going to be happening downtown here. We know that Turkey Creek is an issue. We know that could be taken care of, hopefully soon. But again, if we did maintain just the old section, the 1911, the 1930, either did something with that, was even brought up selling it. So again, we covered a lot of different things, and I'm sure that happened at everybody's table, but I think the big thing is that there's some history here that needs to be preserved and somehow tied in with what can happen in the future after Turkey Creek is taken care of. That pretty good, guys? You got that represents you well? Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
I would say one of the things that kind of came up in our group that, for me personally, was eye-opening was acknowledging what Scott just said of the idea that people like the history of the center of the building, but that doesn't necessarily mean we need the building. Everybody in our group acknowledged that history, but not necessarily to the point of keeping the building as is, as long as we did something that acknowledged that history, keeping the stones, reusing the stones, making a historical marker of some point, something more than a little plaque, but something of that sort to keep the history around. But there was a little bit less interest in actually keeping and upkeeping the building. One of the big ideas was low cost and not raising taxes at our table, looking at probably taking down the buildings and looking at multi-use open spaces, community gardens. There was some interest in the ice skating rink and other shows in the area, public facilities, Definitely retaining ownership, that most everybody in our group agreed with that. Keep it long-term and look for other uses, bring in activities that bring families into the area. But mainly open usage and outdoor activities. And then right at the end, talking about maybe if we did have some actual building area, for that to be quite small, but maybe have permanent public restrooms for some of those usage ideas. Did I miss anything big? Oh yes, thank you. Yeah, one of the ideas when we talked about the history of the building and of the area was some of the pieces that were usable or keepable and had an image, to donate some of the pieces to the Johnson County Museum down at 87th and Metcalf and have a little Merriam area there.
One thing that we were all unanimous about was that the city should maintain ownership of this lot. We should not sell it. We had a lot of ideas though, what we could do. We talked briefly about having a dog park. Potentially there could be passes to recoup some revenue from this area. We were very interested in youth activities, youth and family activities outdoor. Sorry, I don't hold the microphone very often. We were interested in preserving the shell of the building, of the 1911 building, and using it as a pavilion of some sort. Either it could be rented out or used for retail, maybe many, many years in the future. See, a pump track, we liked that idea as part of the outdoor activities that people could have. That's the bicycle, like a bunch of artificially created hills and things people could jump around on. We like the idea of food trucks and potentially providing electricity for those so it's not as noisy. We wanted to keep the cornerstone, definitely, and I think that's part of the 1911 building over there, so if the shell was kept, the cornerstone would come with it. Also, this site is home to a 0 to 6 playground, so having some sort of 0 to 6 area or a multi-generational playground would be nice in Merriam if it's not on this site somewhere else. But possibly having an amphitheater, an open space, and using parking, or using the land along Merriam Drive as potential diagonal parking would be nice when there's big events at the marketplace. And then we were also talking briefly about community gardens. That sounds like a lovely idea. There's also high maintenance though, potentially with that. And it's not a all year round use of the land, so that's something to consider. And we also talked about exercise stations. There's a park down by the plaza called Mill Creek that has a series of, like, every quarter mile or something. There's a section where you can do like pull-ups or push-ups, that sort of thing. And then we also did have interest in our group in maintaining the 1911 building. It was not a majority by any means, but there was a sincere desire by an individual to keep the 1911 building open and find a use for it, potentially like a building, like a business incubator. So that's our group's ideas.
There was a general consensus that we didn't think that the city should give up ownership of this property because you can't get it back after you get rid of it. So there was a desire to not build residential or retail space on here, so really keeping it open to the citizens. There was talk about getting rid of all the buildings except for the 1911 building and somehow repurposing that. There was talk about maybe moving a art gallery space in here in the 1911 building. But then we also kind of, I think, understood that there's a chance that people are going to want this building taken down. So there was a huge desire to save the stone. Someone over here talked about a marker. Someone over here talked about the cornerstone. An idea that came up over here was maybe reusing those for neighborhood markers, because neighborhood markers, you can see them around the cities a lot, and it would help this area live in a different way. And then if it wasn't used for that, used for something, And something that came up at the very end was if we do keep the 1911 building, that maybe it could be incorporated inside of some of these other ideas, like the center part of the amphitheater and amphitheater. So maybe restrooms are in there, or maybe it's the backdrop for bands, or the movie could be projected onto it with a screen. So we don't lose the building, but it's given a new life by becoming something bigger and different than what it is now. Oh, and no new taxes.
Well, the microbrewery thing is a private sector use that you're thinking if you sold it, or that the city would manage? So, okay.
Yeah, we can keep, I don't know what the footprint is percentage-wise for the 50s building compared to the 30s and the 11. But we could have amphitheater, that's fine, but I think this structure could be put to use. I know somebody said that you want to keep some stone and give it to some other place and set it up. Then you lose the character of the whole structure. I wouldn't say keep it for historical purposes. I know some of you went to school here. It's not historical as much as it is keep the structure. But we're always in too much of a hurry to tear things down. I see it all over the city. Think shopping centers. Everything's taken down and hauled off to the dump, and I hate to see that happen. And just use your imagination. If you sell it with the proviso, you keep the stuff.
Great, thank you for the addition. I was going to say that I thought we had consensus on not selling the property, but we have a thread in there that maybe we should still be looking at, the pros and cons if you could get the right activity in. So the other thing everybody mentioned was that the ones who would love to save the old building, but if you can't make it work, that saving part of it, or at least salvaging the stone, is the second and third choice. And then use the rest of the site for different kinds of outside activities that would draw people back downtown. And there's a lot of, I think if we look at all the green dots, we'll get a pretty good sense of the kinds of things people would like to see. Okay, great. You guys did a great job. What we're going to do is, as soon as possible, you have to fill out your comment cards, and so we can take those back. You can fill it out online in a couple days if it gets up then. We're going to post the presentation online so people who couldn't be here can hear the same thing you did. And then the team is going to take the maps that you did and the notes that you have and the ideas that came out, and we're going to start looking at different options for how those can get married together, or have some choices that make the most sense out of what you guys have said. Nobody here has talked a lot about cost, and the committee has a big responsibility to match. The best thing of what we'd like to do was some possible way to pay for it, and that's just the toughest part of this. So the team will look at that with their options. The committee is meeting soon to kind of distill what we did tonight, and then we want you guys to come back June 26th. Is that right? Right, Dave? So that we can talk about where we're ending up with a recommendation on this thing, and make sure you guys have an opportunity to see that. So with that, it's 9:05. We'll let you get out of here. And thank you very much for taking the time tonight to do this. Huge help. Thank you.